Why would you do that right off the bat? Really should be expecting that from you, Mick. Also, hello, butterfly. Drop this real quick. Down away. Ouch. Loading up the VR chat world. Yeah, fuck it. Let's just go ahead and go live. Why not? Yeah, it's gonna see my scuff. It's always scuff. Here, instance, invite only, join. Hello, Darkfire. How's everybody doing today? Go. God damn it, Lita. Oh. I have book 2 here with me, which is about 40 pages longer than book 1. Okay. I got snacks, I got drinks. So, how's everybody doing today? Go ahead and chat for a bit before this starts up. Oh. There we go. There's that. Exhausted. Existing. Oh, jeez. Those are two not very... Well... Hopefully I can help you guys relax, and I'll give you both a better night. Hey Mick, you excited for Tuesday? On and off planes all day. Oh geez. Yeah, I don't know how well that would go. But yeah, I know my plans for this week. Tomorrow I will be playing more War Thunder, probably, with Smeagol. And Tuesday will be Stardew with Mick. Pretty sure it's Stardew with you, right, Mick? I'm assuming you can hear me. Let's see. But obviously Wednesday is my actual birthday, and Thursday will be the stream that I try to hang out with y'all for it. So. So, looking forward to that. Okay. I just muted my microphone while I was opening up my snack. I didn't want to start hitting y'all with the ASMR bullshit. The that package is a little crinkly. So that is not my forte. There we go. Go ahead and do that. Oh, actually, do I need to refill my water? Yes. I'll be right back. Hi there, Ingrid.
Hello there.
Hello there. Ingrid. It's alright. I was just refilling my water. Because I have a funny feeling I know what's going to happen eventually. So how's everybody doing today? Hey, Leah. Leah, why are you choosing violence, Leah? That is not necessary. I do need a light on, though. Light will come in handy with actually reading. I might be nocturnal, I may love the night, I may love the dark. Doesn't mean I can read in the dark. I'm gonna try to take a picture and share these in chat real quick. Okay. You need a dead emote? Because I... Oh my god, Leah. Well, come here. I can try to do what I can to help you feel better.
She grabbed my hand, asked me what I think about. But you know what? You know. I know. I stay. Remember this feeling in
I don't know if it'll help you feel better, Leah, but feel free to come over. You can relax. I got ice cream. A couple flavors. Oh no, I just bought the ice cream like 2 days ago. I know it's not expired.
she lights in the silence.
I forget what one of the flavors is. It sounded good. I haven't had it before.
She grabbed my hand, asked me
But the other one's like a mint chocolate chip.
what the house lights deep in the woods. My life will never go on without you. Although feels like falling down in the tears. I know I stay. Remember this feeling in my heart and the we're frozen. That sounds like endless.
Okay, so
We walk
I have 3 pictures I'm gonna have to share.
in the silence.
Okay. Hung.
She grabbed my hand, asked me what I think about.
I mean, come on over. After stream, I'll probably be cooking a bunch of burger.
You know
Either meatballs, sloppy joe. Fuck, I don't know what I'm gonna make. Just something. Either that, or I can try making the steak. Got a couple of steaks in the fridge too. Okay, so Sloppy Joe be out of the question then, because that uses a lot of ketchup. For, I mean, it's more. It's used as like the, like how Manwich or whatever that just sauce that coats some meat. That's essentially. I make my own sauce. It's just one of the core ingredients is a lot of ketchup.
She lies in the silence. She grab my hand, ask me what I think about.
Okay, I have these images up. I don't know if I'll be able to get to them yet today. I'm sure I'll get to the first one. I will share the images as we get to them in the story. Hello and welcome. Thank you for the lurk, Twisted Wolf. You can tell I've had this book for a while. Man, it looks a little bit worn. I used to carry my books in my lunch pail going to work. Because I used to work in a place that was actually clean enough to read without like feeling like I was gonna overly damage my stuff. So and away we shall go. The rolling hills continued endlessly. Boulders were prominent. Grass and trees were few. The road wound thinly between the hills, frequently becoming so narrow that even a single cart was enough to block it entirely. Just when it seemed that climbing would continue forever, the road turned down. And the seemingly endless naked rocks and dried shrubs suddenly changed to a wide awaiting vista. While the journey had been more interesting than endless grass plains, most would find the travel tiresome by the 5th day. From the road, tinged with a loneliness that suggested a coming winter, The voice that once sounded its delight at the undulations of the stony ochre path was now gone. Its owner was now apparently too bored to even sit on the bench of the cart. She lay instead in the bed, grooming the fur of her tail. A young man drove the cart, apparently used to such selfish behavior on the part of his companion. The man, Kraft Lawrence, was instantly recognizable as a traveling merchant. This year made the 7th since he struck out on his own, and he appeared around 25. As if in acknowledgement of the chill that came with the deepening autumn, he tightened the fur coat that was wrapped around his body. Occasionally, the chill also caused him to stroke his chin, covered in the sort of beard one often saw on traveling merchants. Since when he sat still, he became slightly cooler, letting a breath escape that would have turned foggy once the sun set. Lawrence glanced over his shoulder at the bed of the cart. Normally filled to the brim with various goods, the bed was enjoying a brief respite. All that stood out was the firewood and straw that provided warmth at night, and along with a single bag, small enough for a child to carry. However, the contents of the bag were more valuable than an entire cart full of wheat would have been. The bag was full of high-grade pepper, worth roughly 1,000 silver trenny. If it could be sold in a mountain town, it might fetch as much as 1,700 pieces. But the bag was currently being used as a pillow by Lawrence's companion, who continued lazily grooming her tail. She was small, with a face that was somehow imperious despite its apparent youth. Reminiscent of a queen relaxing in her palace, the hood of her robe was thrown back, exposing her pointed ears as she attended to her tail, her expression listless. Welcome back, Ingrid, and I just happened to fucking read what you said, Leah. Rip. Given the tail, the pointed ears, and the fact of her status as a merchant's traveling companion, one might reasonably think of a dog. But unfortunately, she was no dog. She was apparently a wise wolf. A wolf god from the taiga in the distant north. But Lawrence felt there was some question as to whether she could be properly called a wolf. After all, this wolf appeared to be a young girl. Calling her a wolf seemed slightly inaccurate. "We'll be reaching a town soon," he said. "Be careful." It would be disastrous for the girl's ears and tail to be seen by others. The truth was, her caniness would put the instincts of even the sharpest merchant to shame. Thus, Lawrence didn't need to warn her of the danger. However, she was so thoroughly relaxed that he simply had to speak up. Not so much as glancing at him, she only yawned hugely. You got this, Ingrid. Good luck. Oof. Oh god. I yell at my cats all the time for doing that, Leah. Not so much as her yawn concluding with a vacant exhalation. She now nibbled puppy-like on the snow-white tip of her dark brown tail, as though it itched. She did not appear to have the slightest inclination to be careful. Having introduced herself as a wolf and possessing these ears and this tail, Horo certainly relaxed with the carelessness of an animal, if nothing else. A slight vocalization that could have been a reply, or it could have simply been a small utterance of satisfaction at having concluded or conquered the itch, reached Lawrence's ears. Tired of waiting for her reply, he looked forward again. Horo and Lawrence had met 2 weeks earlier, owing to a strange event in one of the villages that Lawrence stopped at. Horo had joined him, and the two had been traveling together since. With her ears and tail, she was currently regarded as an evil spirit, and the church sought to end her life to preserve order. Lawrence had not a shred of doubt that she was in fact a wolf rather than a simple girl, who happened to have a wolf's ears and tail. Just 9 days earlier in the river town of Pazio, as a riot of silver chasing had come to a close, he had seen her true form. The huge brown wolf named Horo had understood human speech and possessed an overwhelming presence that was undeniably that of a god. Yet Lawrence believed his relationship with Horo the Wise Wolf to be one of money, of partners in lending and borrowing, of companions in travel, and of friends. I was okay with shirt. Oh god. Oh god, the overexcitement of small dogs is always amusing. He looked behind him again, and Horo appeared to be curled up in sleep. Although her legs were covered by the pants she wore under the robe was still hitched up around her waist from her earlier tail grooming, and there was no denying the fact that the sight was slightly lascivious. Her sleeping expression was the very picture of a defenseless and was a very picture of defenselessness. And coupled with her slight form, Horo looked less like a wolf and more like the sort of girl a wolf was likely to eat. Oh jeez. I'd love to hear the backstory that you have, Leah, at some point. Like next time we're on a long call or something, I'd love to hear it. Nevertheless, did you see the sad shirt story? Oh no, I did not. Nevertheless, Lawrence did not take her lightly. Her wolf ears pricked suddenly, and she stirred, pulling her hood over her head and drawing the edge of her robe down to covering her tail. Lawrence looked ahead, and just as the road drew near to the face of a hill and curved, before them, the figure of a single merchant on foot could be seen. Cautioning Hodo had indeed been unnecessary. Hodo the Wise Wolf was hundreds of years old, and the young man's 25 years of experience were far from sufficient to make him her equal. However, Hodo looked to be the younger of the two, with her true age being many times greater than what it appeared to be, a fact that occasionally irritated Lawrence. It was Lawrence's hope that Hodo would act more in keeping with the apparent difference between their ages, obediently minding him when she was told. A variety of problems could have been avoided this way, and the wolf would have him to thank for this. But unfortunately, the opposite was much more common. Lawrence glanced back to the cart bed once more. Despite the surreptitious nature of Lawrence's backward peek, Hodo returned his look from where she lay, curled up around a bag of pepper. She threw him a mean-spirited grin as to say, yes, she could see everything ahead just fine, before closing her eyes once more. Lawrence turned back to the road. Perhaps enjoying the cart ride, Hodo's tail flicked back and forth. The town ahead bore a strange name of Porosan. Beyond the town to the north and east, they would travel towards towns and villages that lay many days beyond the highlands in the foreground. The dress and food of the people would change. Even the gods worshipped would be different. The pair would find themselves in a truly foreign land. Lawrence had heard that Porosan was until recently known as a gateway to another world. Descending to the west of these rock-strewn highlands, one would find abundantly fertile, forested land in all directions. Yet the land, hemmed in as it was by the surrounding rocks, which yielded little spring water, was difficult to farm. The only reason to take the trouble of founding a town here was its position as a gateway to another world. They continued through the fields. Lawrence could hear the faint cries of goats through the morning haze as he counted the many gravestone-like posts he saw. The posts were carved with the names of many generations of sages in the church's long history, and continue to purify the land even now. Long before it was known as a gateway to another world, Porosan was a holy land to a certain pagan faith. Many years had passed since the church, following the will of its god, sent missionaries to convert the heathens, starting a war to purify this land tainted by impure beliefs. Porosan was a psychological turning point in the process of the destruction of the old faith. Once the church was on the verge of wiping out the pagan faith in the area, the priest commanded that the town be founded here. Porosan soon became the staging area for the missionaries and knights heading north and east after the remaining pagans, and it came to have a reputation as a crossroads for both goods and people. the missionaries with their tattered hermit-like robes, and the knights with their righteous swords in hand, ready to reclaim the land in the name of their god, were now gone. All that passed through the town these days were woven goods, salt and iron from the north and east, and grain and leather from the south and west. The holy wars of the past were long gone, replaced by the continuous comings and goings of shrewd merchants. Porto's presence made it necessary for Lawrence to take roads with little traffic. But along certain ancient trade routes, they continually passed carts laden with rare goods. Many of the textiles they saw were particularly fine quality. Despite the brisk trade, Portosan was rather modest, thanks to the habits of its residents. The wealth of commerce provided for a magnificent wall around the town. But the buildings within were of humble stone construction, their roofs thatched with straw. It's true that wherever goods and people intersect, money will be left behind and the area will prosper. But Portosan's circumstances were slightly different. Hi there, Cross. Okay.
She grabbed my hand, asked me what I think about. But you know what? You know.
The residents were all highly devout and gave most of their money to the church. Furthermore, Portosan was not the holding of a particular nation, but rather of the religious capital of Reuvenhagen to the northwest. So the tithes did not stay in the town's own church, but instead flowed to the larger city. In fact, the church offices manage land taxes as well, but Portosan didn't even control its own tax revenue. The residents of the town had no interest in anything beyond their own humble lives. When a bell sounded through the morning haze, the workers in the fields paused their labors, turned to face the sound, putting their hands together and closing their eyes. In a typical town at this hour, red-faced merchants would be busy jockeying for position in the town square. But here, there was no such rude commotion. Not wanting to intrude upon the residents' prayers, Lawrence stopped his cart horse, and putting his hands together, he offered a prayer to his own god. The bell rang a second time, and when the people returned to their work, Lawrence made his cart horse walk again. Suddenly, Porto spoke. Oh, so you're a religious man now, are you? I'll pray to anyone who can promise me safe travels and tidy profits. I can promise you a fine harvest. Otto faced Lawrence as he glanced at her out of the corner of his eye. You want me to pray to you then? Hodo knew and hated the loneliness felt by gods. Lawrence believed she couldn't possibly be serious, but he ventured to ask. He suspected she was joking with him out of boredom. As expected, her reply came in a purposefully sweet voice. Yes, I certainly do. What shall I pray for then? Asked Lawrence, by now used to this sort of treatment from Hodo. Whatever you like. I can provide a bountiful harvest, naturally. But safe travels are also no problem for me. I can predict the winds and rain and tell whether spring water is good or bad. And I'm just the thing for getting rid of wolves and wild dogs. She sounded like a village youth extolling his virtues to a merchant guild, but Lawrence thought for a moment before answering. I suppose safe travels would be worth praying for. They would they not? Answered Hodo, with a self-satisfied smile, inclining her head slightly. Seeing her carefree, innocent smile, Lawrence wondered whether she wasn't simply trying to praise her own abilities over the god of the church. Every once in a while, Hodo exhibited a certain childishness. Well, I suppose I'll ask for safe travels then. It would be heartening to avoid wolves. Safe travels, is it? Indeed. Lawrence tugged on the reins to avoid a donkey grazing in the grass. The gateway to the town walls would be upon them soon. The end of the line of people waiting for inspection was visible even in the morning mist. Though the entire town was part of the church, many merchants came to it from pagan lands, so Potosun was remarkably accommodating. Its inspection of goods was much stricter than its inspections of people. Lawrence was considering the tax likely to be levied on the pepper. On the pepper he carried, when he became aware of someone looking at him from the side. There was only Hodo. What? Is that all? I'm asking if all you require is safe travel. Staring blankly at Hodo for a few moments, Lawrence realized what she was talking about. Thank you for the head pat, Mick. I am looking forward to Tuesday with you. What? You wanted me to put my hands together and pray? Don't be ridiculous, she said with a vexed glare. I'm guaranteeing you safe travel. Surely you don't think that a single useless prayer is compensation enough. Lawrence's mind turned like a water wheel as he arrived at the obvious conclusion. Aha, you want an offering. Silent pop. Why must you bog me? Hodo gave a self-satisfied chuckle. Well, what do you want? Dried mutton. You gorged yourself on the stuff yesterday. It must have been a week's worth that you ate. I've always room for mutton. Never shy, Ahodo licked her chops at the memory of the meat. It seemed even the noble wolf was a mere dog when presented with dried victuals. Okay. Cooked meat is good too, but I simply cannot resist the texture of dried meat. If you would pray for safe travels, dried mutton is the price. Hodo's eyes blazed, and her tail switched restlessly underneath her robe. Lawrence ignored this completely, instead looking at the goods loaded in the horse that was being led by a merchant in front of them. The horse's back was piled high with a mountain of wool. What about that wool? Is that good or bad? Wool evidently suggests sheep. Hodo looked at the mountain of wool, her eyes brimming with anticipation, before answering quickly. It's quite good. So good I can almost smell the grass they ate. I thought as much. My pepper should fetch a good price here. If the wool was of high quality, the meat would be excellent too. And as the quality of the meat rose, so too did its price. Expensive meat, made as pepper, which could be used to flavor and preserve it, all the more valuable. And Lawrence began to look forward to selling his wares. Also, dried meat with lots of salt is good. Just a little bit of salt will not do. Also, meat from the flanks is the best. Better than meat from the legs. Here now. Are you listening? Salted meat from the flanks. You have excellent taste. That'll cost us. 'Tis a bargain at twice the price. It was true that some good mutton was a bargain if it meant Hodo would guarantee safe travels. After all, her true form was a giant talking wolf. She could probably even protect him from all kinds of ill-mannered soldiers that were hard to distinguish from in-and-out thieves. Nevertheless, Lawrence assumed a purposefully blank expression as he regarded Hodo. His eyes were fixed greedily upon the imagined food. He couldn't help but tease her. Well now, you must have quite a bit of money indeed. You got so much, perhaps you should repay me. Yet his opponent was a canny, wise wolf. She soon discerned his motive. Her demeanor tightened suddenly as she glared at him. That approach will no longer work. Apparently, she had learned from the apple incident. Lawrence licked his tongue in irritation, his face grim. You should have just asked nicely in the first place. It would have been much more charming. So if I asked charmingly enough, will you buy some from me? Asked Hodo without a trace of charm. Lawrence eased the horse forward as the line moved, answering flatly. Of course not. You could stand to learn something from those cows and sheep. Try chewing your cud, hmm?
She grabbed my hand, asked me what I think about.
He grinned to himself, proud of his wit, but Hodo's face went blank with anger. And without a word, there on the driver's seat of the wagon, she stomped on his foot. The road was nothing more than hard-packed dirt, the simple houses made of rough-hewn stone and thatched with grass. The people of Portosen bought nothing but the barest necessities from the merchant stalls. So there were surprisingly few such stalls. A goodly number of people moved about the town, among them merchants with carts or backs fully loaded. But the atmosphere seemed to suck up the normal town chatter like cotton. So it was oddly quiet. Okay, take care, Ingrid. May your stream go well.
We walked in the silence. She grabbed my
It was hard to believe this quiet, simple, proud town was a nexus of foreign trade that earned dizzying amounts of money every day. After all, missionaries whose street corner sermons went largely ignored in other cities could count on gratefully attentive crowds here. So, how was profit so effectually made? To Lawrence, this town was nothing less than a mystery. "'Tis a tedious place," came Hodo's assessment of the uniquely religious town. "You're only saying that because there's nothing to eat. You speak as though I think of nothing else." Shall we take in a sermon then? Just ahead of them, a missionary preached to the crowd, one hand on the book of scripture. The listeners were not only townspeople. There were several merchants whose prayers were normally for naught but their own profit. Hodo regarded him distastefully and sniffed. "He's about 500 years too young to be preaching to me." "I dare say you could stand to hear a sermon on frugality." Toying idly with the silken sash at her waist, Hodo put her hand to her mouth and yawned at Lawrence's suggestion.
She grabbed my hand, asked me what I think about. The house lies deep in the woods.
"I'm a wolf yet, sermons are complicated and difficult for us to understand, she said, shamelessly, rubbing her eyes. Well, as far as the teachings of the god of frugality go, they're more persuasive here than anywhere else, I'd reckon. Nearly all the money made here flows to the seat of the church northwest of here, Ruvenhagen. Now there's a place I've no desire to hear a sermon. The church capital of Ruvenhagen was so prosperous some said its walls had turned to gold. The upper echelons of the church council that controlled the region had turned to commerce to support the subjugation of the heathens. When the priests and bishops of Ruvenhagen put the merchants to shame. Lawrence wondered if that was precisely why opportunities for profit there were so absurdly plentiful. Just then, Hodo tilted her head quizzically. "Do you say Ruvenhagen?" "What, do you know it?" Lawrence gave Hodo a sidelong glance as he steered the wagon to the right once the street forked. I remember the name, but not as a city. It was a person's name." You're not wrong. It's a city now, but it was the name of a saint who led a group of crusaders against the pagans. It's an old name. Perhaps you don't hear it much anymore. Maybe 'tis him I'm remembering. Surely not. Lawrence laughed it off, but soon realized Hodo had set out on her travel hundreds of years ago. He was a man with flaming red hair and a great bushy beard. He had hardly gotten a glance at my lovely ears and tail before he set his knights after me with spear and sword. I'd had enough, so I took my other form and kicked the knights around before sinking my teeth in Ruvenhagen's backside. It's rather lean and far from tasty. Hodo sniffed the air proudly as she relayed the gallant tale. The surprised Lawrence had no response. In the holy city of Ruvenhagen, there were records of Saint Ruvenhagen having red hair, and the city itself originally been a fortress that fought against pagan gods. However, in his battles against the heathen deities, Saint Ruvenhagen was said to have lost his arm. That is why on the great mural in the city cathedral he is pictured with no left arm, his ragged clothing smeared with blood, resolutely ordering his crusaders forward against the pagans. The protection of the god at their backs. Perhaps the reason Saint Ruvenhagen was always pictured in clothes so ragged he might as well be nude was because Hodo had shredded them. Her true form was that of a massive wolf, after all. It was easy to imagine her bloodying someone after a bit of sport. Hi there, Callie. Welcome to stream tonight. If what Hodo said was true, Saint Ruvenhagen had probably been ashamed of being bitten on his rear that he omitted that bit from the story. In that case, the tale of the saint losing his arm was pure fabrication. Had Hodo bitten the real Saint Rubenhagen? Hearing the story behind the history, Lawrence chuckled. Oh, but wait a moment, said Hodo. Hmm? Ah, that sounds exciting, Callie. Hopefully that goes well for you. Hi there, Nixie. Pleasure to have you here, as always. I only bit him, I'll have you know. I did not kill him, said Hodo, quickly anticipating Lawrence's reaction. For a moment, Lawrence didn't understand what she was getting at, but soon he realized. It is not a... No, it is absolutely a pleasure to have you around, Nixie. You're part of my community, and it's a pleasure to have everybody around. Even for the one who always chooses violence, Leah. Presuming you can still hear me. She must have assumed he would be angry if she killed one of his fellow humans. You are considerate at the strangest of times, said Lawrence. 'Tis important, said Hodo, her face serious enough that Lawrence capitulated without any further teasing. Okay. Ad will soon be starting. I'm gonna take this opportunity to get a new drink. And I will wait till the ad is over and then I will continue. You've been booped. Oh, fuck me. Oh. So, how'd everybody's Mother's Day go? What? I'm gonna manually play a long ad, and I will actually be right back. It's going well. I spent pretty much most of today just like relaxing, so pretty much. So, happy to be here though, hanging out with everybody here. So, I will be right back though. Boop.
She lights in the silence. She grabbed my hand, asked me what I think about the house, light deep in the woods. My life will never go on without you. Although feels like falling down in the deep hole, I know I still remember this feeling in my heart and the breeze. We're frozen at times like endless We walked in the silence. She grabbed my hand, asked me what I think about. But you know what? You know. I know.
Okay, and I'm back.
I still remember this feeling in
So, I'm definitely excited to have everybody here. I love this book series, and I love being able to read to you guys. No. Pop. Actually, fuck it. Let's get one of these. Okay. Oh, I also need to update who I am lurking. You went offline? So you need to lurk you.
She grabbed my hand, asked me what I think about the house, light deep in the woods.
Okay. Back there. And let's continue. Anyway, this surely is a tedious city. The middle of the forest is livelier than this. I'll unload my pepper, pick up a new commodity, and we'll be on our way to Ruvenhagen, so just bear it until then. Is it a big town? Bigger even than Pozio. More properly a city than a town. Really, it's crowded. and there are a lot of shops. Hodo's face lit up. With apples, even? Hard to say if they'll be fresh. With winter coming, I think they'd be preserved. Preserved? Said Hodo, dubious. In the Northlands, salt was the only method of preservation. So she assumed preserved apples would also use salt. They use honey. Pop went Hodo's ears, clicking rapidly under the hood she wore. Pear preserves are good too. Also, they're a bit rare, but I've seen preserved peaches. Now those are fine goods. They sliced the peaches thin, packed them in a cask with the odd layer of almonds or figs, then fill up the spaces with honey and seal it shut. It takes about 2 months for it to be ready to eat. I've only had it once, but it was so sweet that the church considered banishing the stuff. Hey, you're drooling. Hodo snapped her mouth shut as Lawrence pointed it out. She took a nervous glance around, then looked back at Lawrence dubiously. You're toying with me, though. Can't you tell if I'm lying or not? Hodo set her jaw, perhaps at a loss for words. I'm not lying, but there's no telling whether they'll actually have the preserves. They're mostly for rich nobles anyway. The stuff isn't just lined up in a shop. But if it is? Swish, swish. Hodo's tail was switching back and forth beneath her robe so rapidly, it almost seemed like a separate animal altogether. Her eyes were moist and blurred with overflowing anticipation. Hodo's face was so close to Lawrence that she rested her head on his shoulder. Her eyes were desperately serious. Fine, fine, I'll buy you some. Hodo gripped Lawrence's arm tightly. You have to! He felt that if he looked sideways at her, he'd be bitten on the spot. A little, though. Just a little. Lawrence said. It was not unclear if Hodo was listening or not. That's a promise, then. You promised. Okay, okay. Let us hurry on, then. Hurry now. Stop grabbing me. Lawrence shrugged her off, but Hodo's mind had wandered elsewhere. She seemed to look off in the distance and muttered as she nibbled on the nail of her middle finger. The heart's right back to you, Nixie. They may sell out, should it come to that. It's adorable. Lawrence was beginning to regret having said anything about the honeyed peach preserves, but it was too late for such regrets. If he dared to suggest that he decided not to buy any after all, it seemed she'd likely tear out his throat. It didn't matter that honey peach preserves weren't something that traveling merchants could afford. It's not a question of selling out, that they might not have any at all, Lawrence said. Just understand that. We are talking about peaches and honey, sir. It beggars belief. Peaches and honey. Are you even listening to me? Still, it's hard to give up pears, said Hodo, turning to Lawrence and looking up at him. Lawrence's only reply was to heave a long, suffering sigh. Okay. There is a new picture I will be sharing on screen. Give me a minute and I will get all these taken.
She lights in the silence. She grabbed my hand, asked me what I think about the house lighted in the woods.
Okay. And Nixie, yes you are. Okay. Let's go ahead and get these pictures up. Okay, so as far as images that were just in the book for what I just read, Hodo was giving Lawrence this look. She really, really wanted the honeyed peaches. Oh, absolutely she's desperate. Could you imagine having apples preserved in honey? With some almond and what else did he say for flavoring? That sounds really fucking good. Thank me for the hug. Come here and you can get your hugs. You don't need to panic. Come here. You can rest your head right here.
She lights in the silence. She grabbed my hand, asked me what I think about the house, light deep in the woods.
Lawrence planned to sell his pepper to the Lot Perron Trading Company, whose name was every bit as odd as the town in which it was located, Poroson. If one were to trace the name, it would surely harken all the way back to some time before Poroson was a town, and only pagans inhabited the area.
I stay.
The strange names were all that remained of the past, though. After all, everyone here was a true believer in the church. Ouch. From the tops of the heads to the tips of their toes, the Lot Perron Company would soon have its 50th master, and each seemed to be more devout than the last. Thus, it was no sooner had Lawrence called upon the company, which he had not visited in half a year, than he was regaled with praise for the newly arrived priest, whose sermons he simply had to hear. As would they not save our very souls? Still worse, the master of the Lot Perron Company seemed to take Hodo in her robes for a nun on pilgrimage, and extorted her to minister to Lawrence as well. Hodo took the opportunity to rail at Lawrence at length, occasionally grinning in a way that only he could see. After some time, their preaching ended, and Lawrence swore to himself that he wouldn't spare so much as a single coin for any honeyed peach preserves. Well then, that went a bit long, but shall we talk business now? I await your pleasure, said Lawrence, clearly tired. But the Lot Perron master had put on his business face now, so Lawrence couldn't let his guard down. It was possible that the master's lengthy sermon was a tactic to wear his opponents down, making them easy prey. So, what goods have you brought me this day? Right here, said Lawrence, regaining his composure and bringing out the pepper-stuffed sack. Oh, pepper! Lawrence kept hidden his surprise at the master's correct guess of the bag's contents. You know your goods, he said. It's the smell, said the master with a mischievous smile. But Lawrence knew pepper yet to be ground has little scent. Lawrence stole a sidelong glance at Hodo, who looked on amused. Let's go ahead and take this off. It seems I am still a novice, said Lawrence. Just a matter of experience, said the master, as far as Lawrence could tell from the man's broad, easy manner. His mistaking Horo for a nun might have also been an act. Still, Mr. Lawrence, you always bring the best goods at the most opportune time. By God's grace, the hay grew well this year, and the pork has gotten fat merely walking the streets. Demand for pepper will be high for a while. If you gotten here even a week sooner, I'd have been able to take it off your hands for a pittance.
She grabbed my hand, asked me what I think.
Lawrence could only offer a pained smile in response, as the cheerful man, the Lot Paran master, had taken complete control of the conversation. He could now use strong arm negotiating tactics. It'd be hard for Lawrence to regain the upper hand. Traders like these in small companies were why the life of a merchant was a hard one. Right then, let's take its measure. Have you a scale? Unlike the money changers whose reputations depended on the accuracy of their scales, the scales that merchants carried were doctored as a matter of course. With commodities like pepper or gold dust, a small adjustment to the scales gradations could make a large difference. So both buyer and seller weighed items on their own scales. However, it wasn't every day that Lawrence dealt in high-priced goods like pepper, so he had no scales. No, I don't have a scale. I trust in God. The master smiled and nodded Lawrence's reply. There were 2 sets of scales on the shelf, so he deliberately brought out the set farther away. Though he was careful not to show it, Lawrence internally sighed in relief. Be he the most devout, faithful follower of the church, of the teachings contained therein. A merchant was still a merchant. Undoubtedly, the first set of scales had been doctored. If Lawrence's pepper was weighed on such scales, there's no telling how much of a loss he might sustain. It could be as bad as a silver piece for every peppercorn. Lawrence gave God his thanks. Even if you believed in a just God, man should be able to discern whether the scripture before him was true or false. A righteous man still trespasses against God if he commits to memory false scripture after all, said the master, setting the scales down on a nearby table. He was probably trying to reassure Lawrence that his scales were accurate. Although merchants were always trying to outsmart one another, it didn't mean trust was never necessary. Now, if you'll excuse me for a moment, said Lawrence, at which point the master nodded and took a step back. On the table was a beautiful set of brass scales, which gleamed a dull gold. It was the sort of set one would expect to see in the offices of a wealthy cambist in a large city, and seemed to be a bit out of place in the shop. The Lot Paran Trading Company's storefront was so plain it was easily mistakable for a simple home. The only employees were the master and a few men. The interior of the shop was also plainly furnished with two shelves situated against the wall, one holding jars that seemed to contain spices or dried foodstuffs, and another holding bundles of documents, paper, and parchment. While the scale seemed not in keeping with the rest of the shop, the balance of those scales was clear. The scales balanced in the center with the plates of counterweights to the left and right. They did not seem to have been tampered with. Relieved, Lawrence looked up and smiled. Shall we proceed to weigh the pepper then? And there was no reason not to. Let's see. We'll need paper and ink. Wait just a moment, please. Wait just a moment, please, said the master, walking to the corner of the room and retrieving ink pot and paper from the shelf. Lawrence was idly looking on when a tug at his sleeve pulled him out of his reverie. There was no one else there. It was Hodo. What is it? I'm thirsty. You'll have to wait, said Lawrence shortly, but he immediately reconsidered. She was Hodo the Wise Wolf after all. She wouldn't make a complaint like that out of the blue. There had to be some kind of reason behind it. Having changed his mind, Lawrence was about to ask her to explain herself when the master spoke again. Even the saints themselves needed water to live. Would you like water, or perhaps wine? Water, if you please, said Hodo with a smile. Evidently, she had only been thirsty after all. Just a moment then. The master left the contract paper, ink, and quill on the table and walked out of the room, going to fetch the water himself. In this regard, he seemed to be no merchant, but the model of a devout adherent of the church. Yet, even as Lawrence was impressed with the master's faith, he gave Hodo a sidelong glare. I know this may seem like nothing to you, but to us merchants, this is a battleground. You could have gotten as much water as you wanted later. But I am thirsty, said Hodo, looking away stubbornly. She hated being scolded. Despite her frightening intelligence, she could be strangely childish at times. There's no point in saying anything more. Lawrence sighed, and to chase away his frustration with Hodo, he set his mind on estimating how much pepper he had. At length, the master returned, carrying a wooden tray with an iron pitcher and cup. Lawrence's shame at having made a business associate and an elder person perform such a menial task was very real. But the master's smiling face seemed to have dispensed with business for a moment. Well then, shall we proceed with the way? Indeed. They began to weigh the pepper, as Hodo looked on, leaning against a wall a short distance away, iron cup clasped between her hands. The weigh was simple enough task, with the set weight being prepared on one side of the scales, and the other being loaded with pepper until it balanced. It was simple, but if one grew tired of seeing the counterweight sink, and was tempted to call it good enough and proceed to the next load, the merchant could unwittingly sustain a significant loss. So both the master and Lawrence carefully balanced each load until each was satisfied before proceeding to the next. For all its simplicity, the weighing was sensitive work, and it took 45 loads to finish. Pepper varied depending on its origin, but a load of Lawrence's product balanced roughly with a single counterweight would have been worth about 1 gold lumine apiece. Based on his most current knowledge of exchange rates, 1 lumion equaled 34 and 2/3 trenny. A silver coin commodity, or the silver coin commodity commonly used in the port town of Pozio. 45 loads of that would come to 1,560 trenny. Lawrence had brought the prepper for 1,000 trenny. That meant a profit of 560 pieces. The spice trade was indeed delicious. Of course, gold and jewels, the raw materials for luxury goods, could fetch 2 or 3 times their initial purchase price. So this was a meager gain in comparison. But for a traveling merchant who spent his days traveling the plains, it was profit enough. Some merchants would haul the lowest quality oats on their very backs, destroying themselves as they crossed mountains, only to turn a 10% profit when they sold to a town. Indeed, compared with that, clearing more than 500 silver pieces by moving a single, light bag of pepper was almost too savory to believe. Lawrence grinned as he packed the pepper back into his leather sack. Right, that's 45 measures worth, right? Where does this pepper come from? It was imported from Ramapata, in the Kingdom of Leiden. Here is a certificate of import for the Malone Company. From Ramapata, then? It's come quite a ways then. I can scarcely imagine the place, mused the master, narrowing his eyes and smiling as he took the certificate parchment from Lawrence and offered them. Town merchants often spent their entire lives in the villages of their birth. There were some who would go on pilgrimages after their retirement, but there was no time for such things when they were actively working. However, even Lawrence, the traveling merchant, knew little of the Kingdom of Leiden, save that it was famous for its spices. To get there from Pozio, one had to take the river all the way to the coast, then board a long-distance sailing ship south across 2 separate seas, a journey of roughly 2 months. The language was different, of course, and apparently it was hot like summertime year-round in Leiden. And the population was permanently tanned near black from the time they were born. It seemed unbelievable, but there was spice, gold, silver, and iron that supposedly came from the place. The Malone Company vouched for the origin of the pepper, which the certificate claimed was Ramapata. Was it a real country? The certificate seems authentic, said the master. That the kinds of bills of exchange, trusted promissory notes, and contracts that passed through the town merchants were huge. Supposedly they could even recognize bills signed by small companies in faraway lands, to say nothing of a huge organization that had their main branches in another country. Recognizing the seal of a company as large as Malone would would be the work of a moment. Signatures were important, but the seal of a contract was the seal. The soul of the contract was a seal. Right then. It'll be 1 lumion per measure. Will this do? Can you tell me what the lumion is trading at currently? Lawrence asked suddenly. You know, he had some grasp of the coin's market value. Gold coin was generally used as an accounting currency. That is to say that it was the basis for calculating the values of many other currencies in the world. Calculations were performed in gold currency and then remitted in other more convenient forms, of course. In that situation, the market value of the currency in question became an issue. Lawrence was suddenly very nervous. Mr. Lawrence, as I recall, you followed the path of Saint Metrogaius in business, like your teacher did, correct? Yes. Perhaps it's a protection of Saint Metrogaius that's kept my travels safe and my business sound. So, I presume that you take payment in Trenny silver. Many traveling merchants wanted to repeat the successes of the past, and so rather than move randomly from one town to another, they trod the paths of the saints of old. Thus, it was a currency they had used at the given time was quite predictable. For the master of the Lot Perron Trading Company, to come to that conclusion so quickly meant he was a very shrewd merchant indeed.
She lights in the silence.
In Trini silver, he continued, the current rate is 32 5/6.
Me while I think.
The rate was lower than Lawrence remembered, but given the town's importance as a trade center, it was well within the realm he could allow. In places where currencies from many different places all converged, the exchange rate with respect to the accounting currencies tended to be lower. Lawrence did the calculations in his head at lightning speed. At this rate, he would get 1,477 Trenny for his pepper. The amount was less than he anticipated at a tolerable price nonetheless. It'd be a huge step toward realizing his dream of opening his shop. He took a deep breath and extended his right hand toward the master. That price will be fine, sir. The master's face broke into a smile, and he accepted Lawrence's hand. A merchant's spirits never better than at the moment of a successful contract. This was one such moment. Horo cut in with a listless voice. Whatever is the matter? Said the master worriedly as he and Lawrence both looked at Horo, who leaned unsteadily against the wall. In that instant, Lawrence remembered the sale of his furs to the Malone Company and suddenly grew very nervous. The master of the Lot Perron Company was a canny merchant who managed his shop alone. Trying to outwit him was likely to end badly. Having Horo around him didn't mean they had to try to trick their trading partners every single time. Even as Lawrence thought this, he stopped short. Hodo was acting strangely. Oh, I'm dizzy. Hodo held onto the cup as her unsteadiness grew worse. The water seemed like it would spill out at any moment. The master walked up to her, looking worried as he stilled the cup and supported her slim shoulders. "Are you recovered?" "A bit, thank you," said Hodo weakly, finally standing straight again, with the master's help. She looked every bit the fasting nun suffering from a bout of anemia. Even someone who wasn't as devout as the master would have wanted to help her. But Lawrence noticed something strange. Underneath Hodo's hood, her wolf ears had not drooped very much. "A long journey will tire even the strongest man," declared the master. Hodo nodded slightly, then spoke. "I may be tired from the travel. My vision seemed to tilt suddenly." That won't do. I have it. Shall I bring you some goat milk? It's fresh from yesterday's milking," he said, catching her a chair and briskly going to fetch the milk without having sacrificed a response. Lawrence was surely the only one who had any premonition that Hodo was going to do something else when she did not sit in that offered chair and instead went to set the iron cup on the table. "Sir," she said to the master, whose back was turned, "I believe I am a bit dizzy." "Heavens, shall I call a physician?" asked the master, looking over his shoulder with a heartfelt concern. Underneath the hood, Hodo's expression was anything but the weak dizziness she feigned. "Look here, it's tilting before my very eyes," said Hodo, taking the cup and spilling a few drops on the surface of the table. Whereupon it flowed smoothly to Hodo's right, and off the edge of the table, dripping to the floor with a small plip sound. "What?" Lawrence walked swiftly to the table and put his hand on the scales. Okay. It was the same set of scales he had so carefully gauged the accuracy of earlier. If they were even slightly off, it would mean a large loss for him. And so he checked the scales' accuracy carefully. And they aligned perfectly with the direction in which the water flowed off the table. This had led to a single conclusion. The weighing was over, and the plates of the scales were empty, save for the counterweights on them. Lawrence took the set of scales, rotated it to face precisely the opposite direction. The scales tipped this way and that owing to the sudden movement. But when set back on the table, the movement slowed and eventually stopped. According to the gradations, the scales balanced perfectly, despite the incline of the table. If they had been accurate, the reading would have been skewed by the slant of the table. The scales had been clearly tampered with. So then, did I drink water or was it wine? She looked back at the master, as did Lawrence. The master's expression froze, and sweat appeared on his forehead. What I drank was wine, was it not? Hodo's voice sounded amused that even her smile was practically audible. The master's face paled to a nearly deathly pallor. If the fact that he used fraudulent scales to swindle merchants was made public, in a God-fearing town like this, all his assets would be forfeit, and he would face instant bankruptcy. There's no one saying that no one drinks less than a master of a full tavern. This must be what that means, said Lawrence. The stricken master was like a cornered hare, unable to cry out even as its predator's fangs pierced its skin. Lawrence walked back toward the master with an easy smile. The secret of prosperity is being the only sober one, eh? So much sweat beaded up on the master's forehead that you could trace a picture on it. It seems I'm drunk in this very same wine as my companion. I doubt we'll be able to remember anything we've seen or heard here. So in exchange, I might be a bit unreasonable. What do you... The master's face shriveled in fear. Taking easy revenge here would be failing as a merchant. No, there wasn't even a motive anger being deceived in Lawrence's mind. All he thought of was the cold calculations of how much more profit he could extract from his opponent's fear. This was an unexpected opportunity. Lawrence drew near the man. His expression was smiling, his tone still every bit the negotiating merchant. Let's see, I think the amount we agreed to, plus the amount you were going to gain, plus... Oh... You'll let us buy double on margin. Lawrence was demanded to be allowed to buy more than he had the cash to secure. It's self-evident that the more money a merchant can invest, the greater profit he can realize. If he can buy 2 silver pieces worth of goods with a single piece, he will double his profit, pure and simple. But to buy 2 pieces worth with 1 piece, you would obviously need collateral. Since the merchant is essentially borrowing money, the lender has a right to demand collateral from the borrower. However, the master was in no position to make such a demand, which is why Lawrence pushed such an unreasonable position. It's a third-rate merchant that doesn't take advantage of weakness. I can't possibly... You can't do it? Oh, that's a shame. I'm feeling significantly less drunk. The master's face was so wet, it seemed to nearly melt as the sweat mixed with tears. His face was a mask of despair. He slumped, defeated. As for the goods, let's see. Given the amount, perhaps some high-quality arms. Surely you have a lot of goods bound for Reubenhagen. Arms, you say? The master looked up, seeming to see a glimmer of hope. He'd probably been assuming that Lawrence had never planned to pay him back. There's always a good bet for turning a tidy profit, and I can get the loan back to you quickly that way. What say you? Reubenhagen served as a resupply base for the efforts of to subjugate the pagans. Any item that served in the fighting flew off the shelves year-round. It was difficult to sustain depreciation losses when selling such goods.
We walked in the silence. She grabbed my
Since Lawrence would be able to purchase double the normal amount on margin, he'd have double the insurance against depreciation, which made weapons a good choice for a margin buy. Master's face shifted to that when he thought of a shrewdly calculating merchant. Weapons, you say? Since I'm sure there's a trading company in Reubenhagen with connections to yours, selling them there will balance out the books. In short, after Lawrence sold the weapons, he bought with money borrowed from the Let Perron company to another company in Reubenhagen. He wouldn't have to come all the way back to Portosan to return the money. In certain situations, the give and take of money could be accomplished with nothing more than entries in a ledger. It was a great triumph of the merchant class. What say you? At times, the business smile of a merchant could be an intimidating thing. At times, a business smile of a merchant could be an intimidating thing. Even among such smiles, Lawrence was an exception. Was exceptionally intimidating as he cornered the manager of the Lat Perron Trading Company, who, unable to refuse, finally nodded. Hi, Kat. How are you?
she lights in the silence.
85. Hi, Kat. You'll probably be you'll be at 100 streams here soon. 100 boops.
Me while I think about lost, light deep in the woods.
Sleepy. I think I was chilling a little bit too much today. Well, it's good to have nice. Oh, it very much is.
I stay. Remember this feeling in my heart and
My thanks. I'd like to arrange for the goods immediately, as I hope to depart for Reubenhagen very soon. Oh God. Understood. For the valuation, I shall leave that to you. After all, I trust in God. Let me get to the end of this little bit, Hope, and then I will find out what images I need. Thank you. The master's lip twisted bitterly in what must have been a pained smile. It was unavoidable that he'd appraise the weapons rather cheaply. Are you two quite finished? Said Hodo, guessing that the strong-arm negotiation was over. The master gave a sigh of dismay. It seemed there was still one person who wanted to say. I dare say my drunkenness is lifting as well, said Hodo, her head tilting charmingly to one side. But she must have seemed like a devil to the master. Some fine wine and mutton would do much for my spirits. Make sure the mutton's from the flanks now. The master could only nod his head at her casual imperiousness. Make it quick now, said Hodo, partially in jest, but hearing these words from McGill, who adroitly saw through his doctored scales. The master turned around and scampered from the room, like a pig smacked on the rear. One couldn't help but feel the master was overdoing it a bit, but if his little fraud was made public, he would be ruined. To what extent? A little bowing and scraping was a small price to pay. Lawrence would have taken a huge hit to his own assets if the trick hadn't been noticed. Poor little man, said Hodo with a delighted chuckle that made her seem even nastier. You've certainly a keen eye, as usual. I didn't notice a thing. I'm beautiful, and my tail fur is sleek. But my eyes and ears are also keen. I noticed the moment we entered the room. I suppose he would have been sly enough to fool the likes of you, though, said Hodo, sighing and waving her hand dismissively. Lawrence would have been happier if she had said something sooner, but the reality was he had not noticed the fraud. And the fact that Hodo did, and turned a great loss into a great gain. It wouldn't kill him to be polite. I have nothing to say for myself, Lawrence admitted, and Hodo's eyes twinkled at his unexpected meekness. Oh, I see you've matured a bit. Lawrence, indeed having nothing to say for himself, could only smile, chagrined. Okay. Okay. Oh god, you've been sneezing for 15 minutes? I know that pain! Oh, I know that fucking pain. Go ahead and run this real quick. Let's see. Chapter 1. Oof. Oh, these chapter lengths are a little unforgiving. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. So this book might take 5 streams. Instructing. Oh yeah. it seems so. I mean, Hope, I think I take decent breaks though. It's like it's not like I'm reading the entire time. Like right now. I'm actually gonna run a little ad real quick to bump back the next auto ad. Oh shit. Ah. But even still, it is a lot of fun doing this. Okay. Looks like the ad is set to finish in about 40 seconds. Go to full color artist sketching. Sure.
She grabbed my hand, asked me what I think about. But you know what? You know.
Ah. Okay. Got that. And ad is over. Let's just continue. There is something known as spring fever. It is most common during the winter in places far from rivers or seas. The streams freeze. The people survive on salted meat and stale bread day in and day out. It's not that no vegetables can survive the frost, but rather that such produce is better sold than eaten. Eating the produce does nothing for the chill, but with the money gained from a sale, firewood can be bought and furnaces stoked. Eating naught but meat and drinking nothing but wine takes its toll. And by spring, many have broken out in rashes. This is spring fever, in its proof of neglect for one's health. Naturally, it's well known for that resisting the temptation of meat and comfort to wine will spare one this fate. Eat vegetables and meat only in moderation. Such will the church's sermon be every day or every Sunday. Thus comes spring. The sufferers of spring fever will only find themselves being terribly scolded by the priest. Gluttony is, after all, one of the 7 deadly sins, whether or not the glutton knows it. Lawrence heaved a long-suffering sigh at Hodo's overindulgence. She burped. That was tasty. She was in high spirits after washing down a fine mutton with some fine wine. Not only was it all free of charge, but after eating and drinking her fill, she could curl up in the wagon bed for a nap. Even the most extravagant merchant will, as a matter of course, think ahead and limit his excesses, but not Hodo. Tapping her feet in delight, she had eaten and drunk with glee, and stopped only to take a break. Lawrence reckoned that if it had been their travel provisions, she would have eaten 3 weeks' worth. And she drank so much wine that he began to wonder where it was going. She turned around and sold the food she extorted from La Perron Master. She could have made a big dent in her own debt to Lawrence. Thank you, Hope. I don't think I'm going to get to the end of chapter 2 today. I might stop at chapter 2, but it'd be good to have for next time. This was yet another reason Lawrence was stunned. Now, I dare say I'll take a nap, said Hodo. Lawrence didn't even bother to look at the source of this exemplar depravity. Oh yeah, no, thank you, Hope. It is definitely appreciated, man. Ah. In addition to squeezing some fine wine and mutton from the La Perron Master, Lawrence had obtained a large load of arms at a very reasonable price. He and his companion left the town of Poroson without so much as waiting for the noontime bells. Little time had passed since then, and the sun was just now overhead. With the clear skies and warm sunshine, it was perfect weather for a midday drink, followed by a nap. Owing to the load, the wagon bed was in a state of disarray. But with wine enough in her, Hodo probably wouldn't mind. The trade road that they took to Reuvenhagen was full of steep inclines and sudden turns just outside of Poroson, but smoothed out into a grand view as it slowly descended. The road meandered on. It was well traveled, which made for a firmly packed surface, with holes being quickly filled. No, sounds good, man. Thank you. It was well traveled, which made for a firmly packed surface, with holes being quickly filled. Even though her bed was packed full of sword hills, Hodo was easily able to nap on top of them and pass the afternoon away since the road was so smooth. Then there was Lawrence, who had drunk no wine and spent all day looking at a horse's backside, reins in hand. His jealousy made it easy for him not to look at Hodo. I ought to tend to my tail, said Hodo. Her tail the only thing she was diligent about. She pulled it out of her robes without a hint of concern. Not that any was warranted. The expansive view meant there was no danger of being surprised by an approaching traveler. Hodo began to comb her tail, occasionally picking out a flea or pausing to lick the fur clean. The care she took on her tail was visible in her silent, single-minded attention to the job. She worked from the very base of her tail, which was covered in dark brown fur, and finally reaching its fluffy white tip. And then suddenly looked up. Oh, that's right. What? When we get to the next town, I want oil. Oil? I've heard it would be good to use on my tail. Lawrence turned away from Hodo wordlessly. Will you buy some from me? Asked Hodo, with a charming smile, her head tilted. Even a poor man would be hard-pressed to resist that smile. But Lawrence only glanced at her out of the corner of his eye. Figures larger than her smile danced before her eyes. Specifically, the debt she owed him. The clothes you're wearing now, plus the extras, the comb, the travel fee, the wine, the food. Have you added them all up? There's a head tax when we enter a town as well. Surely you're not telling me you can't do sums, said Lawrence, mimicking Hodo's tone. But Hodo still smiled. I can surely do sums, but I'm still better at subtraction, she proclaimed, and then laughed at some private amusement. Lawrence knew she was hiding some kind of comeback, but her manner was strange. Perhaps she was still drunk. He glanced at the wineskins that lay in the wagon bed. They'd taken the Lutbron muster for 5 skins of wine, 2 of which were now empty. Good midday drink and nap. Fair enough. He glanced at the wineskins. It wasn't impossible that she was drunk. Well, perhaps you should try adding up all you've used. You're such a wise wolf. You should be able to work out my answer from that. All right, I shall, said Hodo with a smile and cheerful nod. Just as Lawrence looked forward again, thinking how nice it'd be if she were always so agreeable, Hodo continued. You will definitely buy me some, she said. Lawrence cast his eyes askance. Despite her grinning at him, maybe she really was drunk. It was a very charming smile. Just what happens to the wits of the proud, wise wolf. When she has too much wine, muttered Lawrence to himself. Hodo's head flopped from one shoulder to the other. If she fell drunkenly out of the wagon, she could be injured. Lawrence reached out to steady her on her slim shoulder. And Hodo grabbed his hand with a quickness that was nothing short of wolf-like. Surprised, Lawrence looked in her eye. She was neither drunk nor laughing. After all, it's thanks to me that your wagon bed is so cheaply filled. You'll pull in a tidy profit. Her charm had vanished. On what basis? I won't have you belittle me. Surely you don't think I've missed you strong-arming the master. I have a sharp mind, keen eyes, aye. But don't forget, my ears are good too. I couldn't have missed your negotiation, said Hodo. Hodo grinned unpleasantly, showing her fangs. So, you'll buy some oil for me, yes? In fact, Lawrence had taken advantage of the master's weakness during the negotiation. And it was also true that things had gone just as Lawrence had hoped. He cursed himself for being so obviously pleased upon signing the contract. Once it had known someone was going to make a lot of money, they were obvious targets for scrounging and wheedling. It was human nature. Well, how much do you think you're in debt to me for? It's 140 silver. Have you any idea how much money that is? And you think I'm gonna spend more on you? Oh? What? You want me to pay you back? Hodo looked at Lawrence with an expression of mild surprise, as if to say she could pay him back any time she chose. There are none in this world who didn't wish to be paid back the money they have lent. Lawrence gritted his teeth and glared at Hodo, enunciating his response very carefully. Of course I do. If Hodo paid back what she owed in a lump sum, he'd be able to fill his wagon bed with more and better goods, which would mean improved profits. More investment equaled greater return. It was the very center of a merchant's world. Yet, Hodo's expression changed completely at Lawrence's words. She regarded him coldly, as if to say, "Oh, that's how it is." Lawrence faltered at the completely unexpected change. "So, that's how you've been thinking," said Hodo. "Oh, what do you..." Lawrence would have finished with mean, but Hodo's rapid-fire response cut him off. "Well, I suppose if I pay my debts, that makes me a free wolf." "I see. I'll just pay you back then." Hearing these words, Lawrence understood what Hodo wanted to say. Some days earlier, during a disturbance in Pazio, Lawrence had seen Hodo's wolf form and retreated in fear. Deeply hurt, Hodo tried to leave Lawrence, but Lawrence stopped her by saying he would follow her all the way to the North Country to collect the money she owed him for destroying his clothes. "Come what may, you'll pay me back," he had said, "so leaving me now won't get you anything." Hodo had stayed with Lawrence based on the reasoning that making him come all the way out to the North Country would be a bother. And Lawrence had thought that the business about debt repayment was just a pretense for the both of them. No, he'd believed it. He believed that even if she were to repay the debt, she would still wish for him to travel with her to the forests of the North Country, though her bashfulness would prevent her from admitting it. And Hodo had now turned the tables on him. She used the fact that the debt was his own pretense against him. A single word had jumped to his mind. Unfair. Hodo was truly unfair. In that case, I'll just give you your money back and hide myself north. Shall I? I wonder how Paro and Miyori are faring. Hodo looked away, purposely letting a small sigh escape. Lawrence, at a loss for words, glared sourly at the wolf girl that sat beside him and wondered how to retort. He imagined that if he was stubborn and demanded that she pay him now and go on her merry way, Hodo would really do it, and that wasn't what Lawrence wanted. This is where he'd have to cry uncle. There really wasn't anything charming about Hodo. Lawrence looked at her, furiously trying to think of a comeback, but Hodo looked at him obstinately. Some time passed. We didn't decide the due date for repayment. Just as long as I get it by the time we arrive in the North Country. Will that do? Some part of Lawrence was still stubborn. He couldn't simply let the cheeky wolf girl have everything she wanted. This was as far as he could give in. Hodo seemed to understand that. She slowly turned toward him and smiled, satisfied. I think I'll be able to repay you by the time we've arrived in North Country, she said, purposefully drawing near him. And it's my intention to pay you back with interest. Which means the more I borrow, the greater profit for you. So, you'll do it for me, yes? Hodo's eyes met Lawrence's as she looked up at him. They were beautiful eyes with red-brown irises. The oil, you mean? Yes. Make it a part of my debt, but please, buy it for me, won't you? The plea was strangely rational, and Lawrence couldn't think of a good rejoinder. All he could do was slump his head sideways as if exhausted. My thanks, said Hodo, brushing against Lawrence's arm like a cat asking for affection. Which wasn't a bad feeling at all. He knew that was what Hodo wanted, and it was an unavoidable part of his long, lonely time as traveling merchant. Still, you really did haggle him down, didn't you? Asked Hodo, attending once more to her tale as she reclined against Lawrence. This particular wolf could sense lies, though Lawrence didn't bother lying and answered truthfully. Rather, he put himself in a position of having no choice but to be haggled down. Yet the interest rate on the arms was not good. The most profitable method would be import the materials and then assemble and sell the weapons. As far as the business of selling completed weapons went, simply by going somewhere with a constant demand for a large amount of weaponry and turning a fair profit, the amount by which the goods could be bargained down was limited. Lawrence headed to Rubenhagen for that very same profit. How much? What's the point of asking that? How? Hodo glanced up at Lawrence from her position, leaning against him, and then looked quickly away, at which point Lawrence more or less understood. Despite her forcing the oil issue, she was actually quite concerned about his profits. What? I was just worried about scrounging off a traveling merchant who was barely scraping by. That is all. Dude, it's kinda wait. I mean, you're not wrong. Hodo definitely whips him. He was very whipped for her. Lawrence tapped Hodo's head lightly at that nasty comment. Weapons are the best-selling product in Rubenhagen. But many merchants bring them to the city, thus the interest rate on them drops. The amount I could bargain him down is limited. But you bought so much, so you'll come out ahead, yes? The wagon bed was not full, strictly speaking, but it was well laden. The goods were solid, and there was interest though the interest was low in comparison to Lawrence's initial investment. The actual amount of material was nice indeed. The fact he was getting double the material for his investment was icing on the cake. Like the saying goes, one raindrop raises the sea. And so Lawrence's gain might only be second. Might be second only to his profits from the pepper. In truth, the proceeds would be enough to buy more apples than would fit in the wagon bed. To say nothing of oil. But if Lawrence told Horo that there'd be no telling what demand she might make. So he held his tongue. Horo, blissfully ignorant, simply groomed her tail. Looking at her, Lawrence couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. Well, I think we'll make enough to pay for some oil, anyway, he said. Horo nodded, apparently satisfied. Still, now that I think about it, some spice would be quite tasty. Lawrence murmured, as he estimated the likely gain against the cost of the weapons. You've eaten it. I'm not like you, you glutton. I'm talking about the profit. Well, why don't you load up on spice again then? Prices in Rubenhagen or Portoson aren't so very different. I take a loss after paying a tariff. Then give it up, I say, said Horo shortly, nibbling the tip of her tail. If I could get a rate about like what I'd normally get with spices, or a little more, I'd make enough to open a shop. Saving enough money for him to open his own shop was Lawrence's dream. Though he'd made a sizable amount in the kerfuffle and Pazio, the goal remained distant. Surely, there was some screaming. Because surely there's screaming, said Horo. Wait, up. Say, jewels or gold? Those are sure things, no? Rubenhagen is not a profitable place for such things, really. Perhaps catching a bit of fluff in her nose, Horo gave a small sneeze as she licked the fur. Why is that? She asked. The tariff is too high, and it's protectionism. They levy serious taxes on all but a certain group of merchants, and there's no business to be had there. Towns that weaken the foundation of commerce with this kind of protectionism were not uncommon. But Rubenhagen's policy was aimed at turning monopolistic profits. Gold brought to the city church in Rubenhagen could be stamped with the church's holy seal, and such gold would bring safe travels, happiness in the future, or triumph in the battle, all by the grace of God. There was even gold for guaranteeing happiness in the afterlife, all sold for exorbitant prices. The church council that controlled Rubenhagen colluded with the merchants under the power to preserve the monopolies. So taxes on gold entering the city were terrifying, and punishments for smuggling harsh. Huh. If we somehow smuggled gold in, we'd be able to sell it for, 10 times what we paid? But the danger rises with the profit, so I've no choice but to make money bit by bit.
She lights in the silence.
Lawrence shrugged, thinking wistfully to the end of the road. In a city like Rubenhagen, there were plenty of merchants who made in a single day what Lawrence had spent his entire life striving for. It seemed unfair. No, worse than unfair. It was downright strange. Oh, truly? Came Hodo's unexpected reply. You have some idea otherwise? This was Hodo the Wise Wolf after all. She might have come up with some yet unheard of scheme. Lawrence turned to her expectantly, pausing in her grooming for a moment, and Hodo looked up at him. Why don't you just sneak it in? If she was always this foolish, it'd be charming, thought Lawrence to himself, hearing her suggestion. If that were possible, everyone would do it. Oh, so you can't do it. When tariffs go up, smuggling does too. Basic principle. Their inspections are very thorough. Surely a small amount won't be found. If they do find anything, they'll cut your hand off at the very least, and it's not worth the risk.
She grabbed my hand, asked me what I did.
If they do find anything, they'll cut your hand off at the very least. It's not worth the risk. It'd be worth it if you were bringing in larger amounts in, but that's impossible. Hodo smoothed the tail for her and nodded. Satisfied with her grooming, Lawrence couldn't see much difference, but apparently Hodo had her standards. 'Tis true. Well, your business is steady enough. And as long as you make steady coin. Well, right you are, but I seem to have a certain companion bent on wasting the same steady coin. Hodo yawned, pretending not to hear the jibe as she squirmed to hide her tail. She rubbed her eyes and crept back to her place in the wagon bed. Lawrence had not been terribly serious, yet stopped following Hodo's movements and looked at the road ahead. Trying to talk to her once she decided to sleep was an exercise of futility, so he abandoned the prospect. For a while, he could hear the clattering of weapons as she pushed them aside to make a place to nap. But soon silence returned, and he heard their sigh contentedly. Lawrence glanced back and saw her curled in a ball, just like a dog or cat, and couldn't help but smile. He couldn't very well say what he thought of for many reasons, but he did want her to stay with him. As Lawrence pondered this, Hodo finally spoke. I forgot to say it earlier, but the wine we got from the master, I've no intention of drinking it all myself. This evening, we must drink together, and enjoy the mutton too. Mildly surprised, Lawrence turned back to look at her, but she was already curled back up. But this time, she was smiling. Lawrence looked on ahead, holding the reins, and drove the horse carefully, so as to not shake the wagon any more than he had to. Okay. Ugh. Fuck. Why am I so sleepy? Oh. I think the problem is I'm always sleepy though, a little bit. So. Ah, fuck this. That's what? Almost 3 hours? That's pretty decent for one stream. 45 pages of the book. So. Ah, fuck it. Well, we already know who we're gonna raid. Cat. I assume you know who we're gonna raid. Presuming you're still listening. Okay. Sorry today was a little bit short. But I know I will be back tomorrow doing some more War Thunder, Overwatch, whatever the fuck we feel like. But I'll be playing with Smeep. So. Speaking of... Hi there. Hi there, you amazing Aussie. But still. Oh no, does she have follower only chat on? No, she shouldn't. Just gave me a little warning that she does. Whatever. Close enough. So. I know I will be uploading... I'll be uploading all of these to YouTube in their own little playlist. The raw VODs. I will be trying to do it. So right after this is done, I'll be uploading last week's. So I'll be uploading them in a 1 week delay. So, I'll see you guys tomorrow with Smeep. And Tuesday, I'll be playing with Mick. So, thank you guys for all being here. And definitely give Ingrid a follow. She's currently experimenting with Twitch. So, let's make her day. Take care, everybody. And boop.